I'm Scott O'Geary. I'm a member of the Long Island Living History Association. I am a former U.S. Marine. I served 8 years. I've always had an interest in the Pacific Theater of Operations. I also have an extensive collection of Japanese equipment, some of which is here, some of it is still at home. So my display is basically set up as a G2 section of, say, a battalion or a regiment to sort of educate the troops in their command at what they can expect when they face the Japanese. So both equipment and weapons and even the tactics that they may employ as they are fighting. Obviously, in the beginning of the war, we're learning, so we don't know a lot of this stuff as it's going on. But as they start gaining information about the Japanese troops, those are being displayed in different documents, as I have shown up here. These documents were not required reading by the infantrymen, but at least some of the infantrymen would read, and it would basically explain to them all of what I said before about weapons, equipment, tactics, and stuff like that. So as I have set up here, I have Marine Corps equipment, which would sort of be a basic load as to what they would carry into combat, minus the MIT, of course. But the MIT is something that was provided by their special service units for when they were out, when they were not in combat, so they could play sports. So they would be carrying a backpack, a gas mask bag many times, minus the gas mask. They would carry extra stuff in it, maybe an ammo bag. They're carrying the M1928 belt, which would be their ammunition. They carried 80 rounds around their waist, plus they would carry bandoliers that are in that ammo can. And I have it out more or less to show the differences between U.S. equipment and the Japanese equipment. The Japanese equipment during the war, they used a lot of leather. They also traveled very lightweight. The Marine infantrymen and Army infantrymen in the Pacific, as well as Europe, carried a fairly substantial amount of equipment with them, food and extra gear that they would carry, and more personal items as well. But the leather equipment didn't hold up very well in the Pacific due to the moisture and humidity and heat and constantly being wet. It would basically get destroyed and fall apart. As the war went on, they produced a rubberized leather, but although it was used extensively, I don't believe, from what I've heard, that held up very much better than the ordinary leather. These are reproduction that's here, but the belt for the M1928 belt that we would use is an original. So that gives you an idea that those original pieces still last, but the Japanese stuff a lot of times have not lasted. And if you do find them, they're very stiff. This is a Japanese map case. It's from Okinawa, along with a Japanese map of the Matobu Peninsula. That's an original. And the map case is an original, and the leather on this is very hard itself. So somebody must have captured this and brought it home and at least kept it in halfway decent shape. The canteen is a later war, sort of I don't want to say last ditch one, but it's definitely late war. I have better ones at home that are in better condition. They would carry a bread bag, which is this bag here or this bag here, and that would be their supplies. And many a times they're carrying, they did have backpacks. I do not have a Japanese backpack, but when they were fighting on Guadalcanal and some of these other islands, they were very lightweight, carrying mostly this to survive with. So they're carrying their supply of extra socks maybe, and in their socks or some of their gear, they're carrying the rice, the food that they're going to be eating over the next couple of weeks while they're in the field. The Japanese supply system was precarious at best, and the Japanese didn't really have a very great logistical train, not like the U.S., especially as the war progressed for us. Ours got better, theirs got worse. A lot of their troops were hungry, or they were even starving in the fields, and they were expected actually to find food on their own. The rice was there to supplement whatever they found extra. So when you're teaching the troops of what they're going to face with the Japanese soldier, they get they pretty much understand right off the bat that their equipment is is better, is actually superior than to what the Japanese are using. So even the hand grenades were different at the time. We started off the war, or the Japanese started off the war, with a Type 91 hand grenade that could be used in a grenade launcher. They had a Type 10 to start off with, and then the Type 89 grenade discharger that this could be fired from. It also could be unscrewed from the bottom and used as a regular hand grenade. They would pull the pin, bang it against their helmet or some hard object, a rock, and they would throw it. That was early on. Then they went to the Type 89. Some people call it a mortar. It's really not that. It's more a type of a grenade than a mortar. That would be used with the Type 89 grenade discharge. The grenade in the early part of the Pacific War were the Type 97 grenades, and these were pretty decent grenades. 5 seconds usually it lasted. You would pull this out, bang it against the helmet, and throw it, and they were effective. As the war progressed, they switched over to this, a Type 99, which is known as the Kiska hand grenade. These weren't so great at the time. They also weren't that powerful, not as powerful as our pineapple grenades. They also had a problem that when they were lit, sometimes the fuses were not very effective, so it might explode after 3 seconds, it might explode after 5 seconds, but all along it sparked and fizzes. And the Marines and Army soldiers that I've heard talk about it and have spoken with when I was growing up said they could see these coming because they sparked and made a lot of noise. So the helmets down there, as you see, the one is a Japanese Army helmet, and the other is a Japanese Naval Landing Force helmet. That helmet was picked up on Tarawa. Obviously, you could see that there were bullet holes in it. The guy who brought that back was from the 2nd Marine Division. He sat it on a shelf in his garage for I don't know how many years. When he passed away, it was there. His wife passed away, and when his sons were cleaning out the house, they found the helmet. They wanted to get rid of it, and I got it. So the weapons over here as we go, which are different. The Japanese used bolt-action rifles. Their squads were based around a machine gun. They also carried 3 of the Type 89s within their platoons. They used a Type 38 long rifle. Everybody says, at the time the Japanese were like 6'2", 5'2", 5'4". Why did they need such a big rifle? Well, a lot of times they're using this rifle more as a spear when they're going after the enemy and they're keeping him at a distance. It is rather unwieldy, it's pretty heavy. So as the war progressed, they went to the Type 99, which is a shorter rifle and a little bit more manageable. This also would take the Type 30 bayonet, and it was a different caliber, a 7.7, a little bit more effective when they were using it in combat. This rifle, the next rifle over, is a Japanese paratrooper rifle, a Type 2. Very unique. The Japanese did do airborne operations, not very many, but in the very beginning of the war, the most effective one was when they landed in the Dutch East Indies. I think that was their largest airborne operation. This rifle was not used at that time. They were using the Type 99s. They would drop them in canisters the way the Germans did for their paratroopers. And their paratroopers carry a pistol and hand grenades. When they landed on the ground, they would make their way to the canisters to grab their rifles. As a result, they decided they needed to come up with a rifle that the troopers can carry on them when they drop. And this was the answer to it. It would break in half and it would fit in a bag that would go across their chest. I don't know if that's the exact position, but it's roughly like that. These were never used in parachute drops as far as I know. The one this was used in was an airborne assault with gliders that landed on a field in the Philippines. And this rifle came from an 11th Airborne trooper who killed this particular Japanese soldier. And that's how I got this rifle. They also, since they loved bayonets, they also liked the sword. This is a reproduction Japanese NCO sword. It's a really good reproduction, actually. and it's in good condition, and it kind of gives you a feel. Japanese officers and NCOs going into battle many times would be carrying swords. The troopers would be carrying their rifles with bayonets, and if they're doing nighttime assault, a lot of them are running at the enemy, not really firing, but going in for the kill with the bayonets. And all the while they're facing U.S. troops who would hold their ground, had machine guns set up, M1919s, the water cools and the air-cooled weapons. They'd use their rifles, the M1 Garands, which was a superior rifle, semi-automatic, 8 shots, as compared to their 5-shot bolt-action rifles. Very reliable rifles, and are still very effective even to this day. This is the main battle rifle for the U.S. troops in World War II, both Army and Marine Corps. The carbine, the M1 carbine, was also used mainly as a defensive weapon. It was supposed to be for crew-served operations, people in mortar crews and machine gun teams, artillery, things like that. This was supposed to be their main weapon, and it was a defensive weapon. So it was very effective. This weapon, a lot of people don't realize, was meant to replace the .45. That's what the carbine was designed for. And that's about it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.